Thank you so much for coming down here. Senator Hansen from Middletown, Greg from Dover. We're in a very different era now than maybe we would have thought we were going to be a year ago. The Trump administration is not particularly promoting climate change as a threat to our humanity, to our communities, and is in fact actively opposing carbon limits, renewable energy development, electric vehicles. So as you guys are now kind of leading Delaware in 2025, how are you thinking about the role that the state needs to play?
Am I on? Good.
You're on. We're all on, I think.
I think we keep moving forward. You know, the way that the governance is happening in Washington is chaotic, and I think it's purposefully chaotic in order to keep everybody like not knowing what's going to happen when. And my approach has been and is going to continue to be all forward on all fronts as quickly as we can, because you never know when something is going to break through, and we have no control over that. You don't know what's going to get through in Washington and what's going to get stopped in Washington, what's going to start and stop. You can't, and it's on purpose, right? It's on purpose so that it makes folks want to deal. Come to the table and make a deal, right? I mean, that's what we've got in Washington right now. So since we only have very little control over that, we have no control over what's going on in Washington, but we can control what's going on here. And so what we're doing here is we're going to continue to move forward on all fronts, because you don't know when you're going to hit a stop sign and you need to switch over to something else and keep going in that direction, when you can go around, over and under and through. You just have to keep going on all fronts. Because so many times I think that, it's easy to get discouraged and go, well, forget it, we're just going to have to wait until next year. But I can't tell you the number of times when that has happened in the past. And then I've been able to see as the legislative year progresses and we see how much money is available or where it comes from, if you're not ready to spring right then because you gave up a while ago and you said, I'm going to sit back and wait, then you're not going to be in position to take advantage of an opportunity when it's right in front of you. So you have to keep going. You can't expect you're going to get everything. We might not get a whole lot, but we're going to be ready when a door opens.
Greg, with the federal, U.S. EPA now gutted, how do you see DNREC's role in either stepping up to the plate or trying to backfill some of that?
Well, it was a great time to become DNREC secretary. I could have planned that one a little better. Senator Hansen, as usual, is right. The first week that Governor Meyer was in office, that I was in office, and we started to see some of these funding stoppages announced, we would spend the entire day trying to figure out what does it mean, what are we going to do, who gets paid out of that, and literally some of those days, by 4 o'clock, the thing that had been announced at 10 o'clock stopped, was stopped by the courts. And so the governor said in one of our first cabinet meetings, we're not going to overreact. We're going to wait until something actually is happening, not just when they say it's going to happen, because I think Senator Hansen is exactly right. It is all for effect. It's not all going to come to pass. Some of it, unfortunately, will. But we just have to keep moving forward in what the governor has said about environmental stuff, about climate change, about environmental justices. We're just going to keep trying to do the right thing. And there are things that we would like to do that we're probably not going to be able to do over the next 4 years because we don't have the EPA backing us up. One of the things that my fellow state environmental secretaries and I have talked about, and some of them have been doing it a lot longer than I have, is concern about the Office of Research in EPA, which provides a lot of the baseline data for a lot of the policy that happens both at the federal level and that states rely on. That seems to be on the chopping block or being targeted by the new administration, and that's going to hurt a lot. Obviously, things like offshore wind and other things, they're going to find a way to keep them from moving forward. But we just have to, as the senator said, keep doing what we can. As it says in the bio on my website, I'm a girl dad, so a lot of my accumulated life wisdom comes from Disney princess movies. And there's a low moment in Frozen 2 where the song is "Just do the next right thing," and that is what I think we need to do. In the meantime, even absent the federal stuff, there's a lot to do at DNREC that we don't have to, rely on the feds. And as we were getting ready for this, one of the things that Jake said is there's probably some questions in the room about what Greg Patterson wants to do at DNREC or why he's at DNREC. And to that, I'd go ahead and answer that there's a lot of work to be done at DNREC, and there's a lot of management, there's a lot of process, there's a lot of just getting stuff done that is already part of DNREC's portfolio that I think a lot of people think could be done a little better. And my history in state government is being the guy who comes in, assesses a problem, tries to figure out the path forward, and get stuff done. I am not an environmental expert, but the good news is I've got 800 environmental experts in the Department of Natural Resources. My job is to listen to them, to work with the governor and the legislature on figuring out what the path forward is, and to support them in doing the critical work that we have. So there is plenty to do outside of worrying about the Trump administration, and so that is part of my focus as well.
Kind of sticking along those lines a little bit, we've seen debate rising really over the last year over whether Delaware's zero emission mandate, which would require more than 40% of all new cars sold in Delaware by the 2027 model year be an EV or a hybrid, is still feasible. Do you think, and do you think that's something that is still feasible, or do you think the state should rethink its position in light of the current economic realities?
Well, there are certainly lots of people who are telling us and telling the governor that we ought to be rethinking that. In having conversations about the ZEV requirement, one of the things that I've tried to do is make sure everybody understands what Delaware is doing and how that is different than what other states are doing. The ZEV requirement, as it can be adopted, goes from 43% in model year 2027 up to 100% of the cars to be delivered to dealers in a particular state have to be zero emission by 2035. Delaware and a few other states have opted not to go through that entire process. And I can tell you, having been in Governor Carney's office when this was being discussed, he was a little uncomfortable with having a full ban, as people call it, on gas-powered vehicles. You can't, when you're getting into this as a state, change the ratios. You can't change the percentages. You can't decide you're going to have a different percentage. It's either in or out of what's called Advanced Clean Car 2. What Delaware chose to do, and again, a couple other states did as well, is say, we're going to get in, but then we're going to get out before the end. So as written, as finalized as a DNREC regulation, our schedule is to go from the 43% up to 82% in 2032, and then in 2033, we would be back down to a 0% requirement. And the idea was that helps build the market, it helps provide predictability to the auto manufacturers that we want and need electric vehicles here in Delaware, but doesn't go all the way to the point of completely banning gas-powered vehicles. It was kind of a Delaware solution to the choices that we had. The Carney administration wanted to do the right thing and help reduce emissions from transportation, which is one of the biggest problem areas still, but was uncomfortable with the complete mandate. So, as we've talked about on a number of fronts, the landscape has changed because part of the thinking of putting that regulation into place, which was finalized in 2023, was that there would be federal support both for being able to do it at all, because there's a waiver from the EPA that has to be allowed to require it. But there is also the infrastructure support that the Biden administration was putting out as part of the infrastructure law that I helped work on, to build out the network of chargers to give people confidence that they'd be able to charge vehicles when they were on road trips, to continue the federal rebates, and all that is now in question. So I think it is a discussion that lots of people want to have right now, and there are certainly efforts at the federal level. The EPA administrator said he wants to get rid of it, so this is another one where it may not become our choice at some point, but we'll see.
And this all really comes by way of California, who created the ACS2, and we basically signed into it, or at least Governor Carney did. I know Senator Hansen, maybe you want to answer that as well. The question in terms of whether you still see it as feasible if the cost of these vehicles aren't coming down fast enough with rebates and subsidies, and if the charger network is not built out with the infrastructure funds.
I'm worried about it. I mean, the short answer is, Greg and I talk a lot about this, and I'm worried about it. We are this is one area that looks very differently this year than it did this time last year. I have been worried because I haven't felt like our residential build out for infrastructure, like EV charging infrastructure, has been robust enough. We're seeing it in new housing, but how easy is it to get existing housing with EV charging? It's not that easy, and the interconnections are not that easy. There's a lot of difficulty. We've been putting a lot of emphasis on EV charging stations along major roadways, and that's great. We should do that, right? But most people, when they get an EV, are not going to be charging it on I-95 or Route 1 or something. They're going to be charging it at their house. So that's the primary focus where we need to be, where we need to make sure that we are making it easier. So we do have EV charge. We put a bill in place, I think it was last year, where we're giving rebates on EV charging equipment at your home, as well as EV vehicles themselves. But I think what really worries me, it has worried me, period. What worries me more now are the tariffs and how much that's going to affect the cost of EVs going forward. And if we see a rollback on what the federal government is giving us to be able to offer to people as far as rebates. Because if the tariffs go up and we can still account for those and the rebates that we're giving to people to buy electric vehicles, okay, then that's okay. But if the tariffs go up and we can't account for that, and they're even more out of reach for the average person, what are we doing?
Yeah, so that's going to be a politically untenable position if you're forcing somebody to buy a car they can't afford, essentially.
And this is something that all the states that are ACC 2 states, which is about 17 or 18, we're all facing it. We're all facing the same realities of the federal support shifting and some pressures from the industry, and some of them are beginning to, like Maryland has an executive order that forestalls the enforcement for the first 2 model years. And to be clear, there is never a penalty for an individual or even a car dealer under ACC2. It is the manufacturers that have an obligation and a requirement as far as the delivery of their cars to a state, and there are a number of ways that they can meet that obligation to get to those percentages, and part of it is the EV sales that they are doing right now. They can count towards the requirements that will kick in a year and a half or so. But even so, some states have started to talk about not enforcing those requirements for the first couple of years, again, because the landscape has shifted a little bit. So it is not unique to Delaware. And then the other thing is California is thinking about this. And there are conversations going on there about whether or not ACC2 needs to change a little bit.
Speaking on a kind of an adjacent topic, and this is one of my most heard criticisms from like my uncle that is like just doesn't like EVs, and you can put as many electric cars on the road as you want, but if the power creating them is still coal or gas fired, what are we doing? Are you really decreasing a carbon output? And we've seen energy and energy production really be a hot topic in Dover this year, especially around some of the rising cost of energy through Delmarva. Thankfully, many of you down here don't have to deal with that. But one of the reasons this issue is we need to increase and diversify our energy production. Delaware's too low lying for onshore wind. Power plants like natural gas or nuclear take time to develop, which really leaves solar as the obvious avenue to develop new energy production. And yet it doesn't feel like we're producing enough solar fast enough. So is there anything in your way that you see as a challenge or a hurdle that could be cleared to hopefully get more of these resources online?
I'll take that one.
I knew she'd take that one.
He's copping out already.
Yeah, we're in a tight spot here. The reason that we're in a tight spot is that we make less energy in our state than any other state in the country. We are 50th out of 50, so we are dead last with that. And we import most of the energy that we use. Of the energy that we do produce in state, most of it is natural gas. There is a need for us to develop energy at all levels, all kinds, as quickly as we can, because we are also facing a problem of energy reliability. So recently, our regional grid operator, which is operates the electric grid for not just Delaware, but 13 states in the area, has brought to our attention that we are facing an energy reliability problem that will hit us by 2028, if not earlier than that. And the only way for us to get out of that is for us to start generating a whole lot more energy than we're doing right now. So we need to be looking at all things. Now, there is a thought that maybe let's just do more natural gas, right? Natural gas is like the go-to. I don't know that anyone's really on board with bringing the coal plant back. I think when they talk about that, they forget about how dirty and nasty and environmentally fraught that was, what we got ourselves out of with the closure of that. So we'll have to have that discussion, I'm sure, to remind everyone what that looked like. And if there's any way that we can do any kind of emergency, keep that in our back pocket as an insurance policy, we'll have to talk about that. I mean, we have to talk about that for the same reason we have to talk about things like small modular reactors. We got to talk about everything. We have to have the courage to look at the pros and cons of everything. So one of the go-tos right now, though, is, well, let's just do more natural gas. Sure, fine, we can do more natural gas, but there's an element to that people aren't thinking of, which is to do natural gas, to make more natural gas that's dispatchable, that you can call on right now and have it go online. You have to have a gas turbine in order to do that. Those are like big jet engines. There is a 4 to 7 year wait on the manufacture of gas turbines. There's only 3 companies in the United States that make them, and they've said it's a 4 to 7 year wait. We've got an energy reliability issue beginning when? What did I say, 2028? Like they've said perhaps 2026.
Very
so
quickly.
Yes, we do need to look at other things besides natural gas and solar. Well, number one, let's get the wind project back on, okay? Number one, let's get the wind project going, okay? Because that was a terrible decision, and I could talk about that, and you don't really need to hear me, but my heart is in getting that back online, so let's just leave it at that. For solar, though, we need to solve the siting issue. You may not know it, But there was actually a moratorium on large-scale, utility-scale solar in Kent County. So we've got Sussex County saying no wind. We've got Kent County saying, nope, can't do solar. Who wants to stand up for small modular reactors? Who do you think's going to stand up for one of those, right? Or for a large battery center, which we ought to be looking at as well, or for more gas transmission pipelines, because if you wait 4 to 7 years, you can get a turbine, but you got to have pipelines to do it too, right? Everything's got a pro and a con. So what we need, though, are decisions made at a state level for the siting of large energy generating facilities and their associated large equipment made at a state level with local input on what those decisions, how appropriate they are for the particular areas, but then taking in mind, this is a 1 million person issue. This is everybody in Delaware is going to be affected by an energy reliability problem. We don't need one county saying no that then penalizes the rest of us and keeps us from being able to turn our lights on in a couple of years, but to not meet our greenhouse gas goals, to not meet our RPS goals. There's all sorts of reasons why we need to have this decision made at a state level, and I am pursuing siting commission legislation right now.
I think the real issue is you're just not passionate enough. I do want to ask one more question here before I turn it over to the audience, who I'm sure is itching to ask you guys a couple of things. But I know we're in the heart of Sussex County, and we've experienced a major building boom here in the last decade. That's created a lot of concerns around deforestation, the impacts of runoff on our local waterways, like our inland bays. So how do you see DNREC's role in protecting our natural assets, and how do you think changes to our permitting process are needed?
Well, it's somewhat the same issue as the siting one that Senator Hansen just talked about. You know, there's a tradition of local control of land use decisions, and those land use decisions in Sussex County have been made, you know, a certain way for a number of years. I think the good news and the opening that we see from the governor's office, which is working on this, and DNREC and DelDOT's perspective is, thanks to the election results of county council, there seems to be an openness to look at this. So any of the Sussex County Council voters here, thank you very much. Because those conversations are happening now, and they involve the state planning office and DNREC and DelDOT and the new county council land use reform task force. So there is an opening, but it's not going to be easy. The other thing that from specifically a Sussex land use perspective that this administration wants to work on, which we're just starting to get to. So anybody representing towns who haven't heard this yet, don't worry, we're getting there. But making sure that the towns have the resources they need, the coastal towns specifically, have the resources they need to plan for resiliency and sea level rise and storms. Lewis has done a very good job of having a sustainability coordinator and building sustainability and resilience into their planning. And what we as an administration would like to do, and Susan Love, if she's still here, is going to be part of this conversation with the governor's office and with towns, is what can we do to help those entities plan better from a land use perspective and from a resiliency perspective.
All right, so with that, I will open it up to questions from the audience for our esteemed panel. Please, let's keep questions brief so that we can get as many in as we possibly can. We'll start here with Keith or Christoph.
What consideration is being given to on-site energy production, mandated production? All these distribution centers, some are putting solar panels, others are not. Gas stations being built, hospitals, etc. Why are they not being mandated to put some kind of energy production on site? Solar panels, geothermal under pervious parking lots, wind towers, etc. What serious consideration is given to that? That would reduce, it seems like, the demand on energy sources. It would be instantaneous, it would be on site, it could be self-sufficient if need be, and it would also reduce the transmission, the need for transmission lines, etc. Thank you.
I would say that the word mandate is not thought of very well when it comes to the state of Delaware and anything environmental or even energy related. You know, people don't, people in the business world in particular, but just in local government and wherever, just don't like the idea of a mandate. I think that you raise a good issue, and in fact, I just had this conversation yesterday. You raise an issue that's very timely, because I was just talking to a large employer that's getting ready to come into a part of Newcastle County yesterday, and one of the things I asked them was, because we had talked about their energy needs, and I said, well, what are your plans? Are you planning on putting, are you planning on doing your own generation? Are you going to have solar panels on your roof? Because it would be a perfect opportunity to do that. And they said no, that they weren't. And then that started a big conversation between me and this entity, in which I said, well, how are you going to feel, how comfortable are you understanding that we're walking into an energy reliability situation as a state, and you are now locating in an area without your own source, and you're going to be putting a lot of, you're going to need a lot of energy. And so I think that the question was a surprise to them, because I really don't, I know that their concern was that they had a bad experience with solar on the roof of another facility that they had. And they weren't sure whether that bad experience there was just now had become a policy. So what I said at the end of the conversation was, let me talk to your person at your company, and I want to talk to them personally, and I want to connect them with the sustainable energy utility, because a big thing that the SEU does is provide loans to businesses to actually do energy generation on site and on their buildings, and we need to know why. Why are you preferring to locate in a green field when everybody wants you to locate on your roof, on brownfields, on parking lots, all of that? We want to figure out why it is these things aren't landing with companies. So it ends up being a one-on-one conversation that at least I've had, and a very timely one. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I would certainly add that our approach to this point has been one of carrots rather than sticks and incentives, and I was going to mention SEU as well. They do a lot of it for businesses. Our state energy office has some resources for it. And by the way, the money that we're using to do that, it comes from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a regional auction that basically charges power plants in a 10-state region for their pollution, for their emissions, and we use that to create green energy. And that's one of the things that has been part of the conversation this year about why energy prices are so high. And it's, one, not true, because nothing about that changed when bills went up this winter, but also we're using that money to create more generation and to create more renewable generation. So it's another reason why I think we should keep that, and that has been my argument. But yeah, it's the other thing that and this hasn't happened here yet, but in some of the other surrounding states, there are data centers especially that are looking at some sort of generation that they would own, or they would have a power purchase agreement, but then the next thing that they want to do is have it be, I can never remember which it is, before the meter, so that as they generate this, they are not paying into the local utility and the transmission grid the same cost that the rest of us do to keep that grid operating. So it's a good idea, but they should also have to, help pay the grid that they and the rest of us will rely on when that happens.
Christoph? Yeah, we've got time.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up, comment on what you were saying, Greg. that resilience challenge isn't just on our coastal towns. What's going to get the coastal towns is actually the bays. And so we really do need to focus less on what the Corps of Engineers is helping us with and what we need to do ourselves to protect towns like Dewey, South Bethany, down to Fenwick. And so anyway, I just want to make sure, and with the, with the Delaware Bay communities that you're already robustly involved with, just a sentiment, and that's also happens to be where our vulnerable populations are too. Folks who can't find the doctor, can't get to the food store very easily, and all the other things that exacerbate their vulnerability to the changing climate. So just making sure to put that marker down that it's really important to be thinking about Dagsboro and some of the
Absolutely, and as you know, one of the things that we've been working on with the Corps is the Back Bay flood risk and protection study that was stuck for a little bit, and I actually had my latest meeting with the Corps on Monday about getting that moving. That and other projects that the Corps has planned and we would hope would be underway and would have them at less cost to Delaware, thanks to Senator Carper, and some of the very advantageous cost shares that he got in the Water Resources Development Act last year. That was great, except now core funding for those types of projects are decreasing. The continuing resolution that Congress passed in March reduced the Corps' construction budget nationally, so that's going to filter down to everything. And unfortunately, that means the good deal for Delaware, where they have to pay more, the Corps has a greater percentage of the same projects, now means they need more money to do things since the state would be paying less. So again, this is another area where the federal government's choices are going to affect us pretty directly.
I have something to add to that. So Christoph, you'll be happy to know, and you may already know. Last year, I had a bill that was actually brought to me by the Nature Conservancy. So I really want to thank the environmental organizations that are like on the ball when it comes to really, talking with me and others about good legislation. So they had brought the idea of why don't we make it so that it's in the code that all municipalities and counties, all local jurisdictions have to have climate resiliency and climate change built into their decision making in their comprehensive plans as to where they're going to do growth and development. You would think that that'd be common sense and that wouldn't have gotten a whole lot of pushback and a fight. You'd be wrong, right? You'd be wrong. There are some local jurisdictions that are already doing that. Lewis is a great example. But there are some that aren't, and they really, there was an issue raised that, well, we might not have enough people to help with that, but the University of Delaware does provide a lot of that planning resource, and the Sustainable Energy Utility, working, I think, with UD, is also now going to be helping the smaller municipalities. I think we've got like 57 or so local jurisdictions in the state of Delaware, so that bill passed. And so they all now have to have climate change and resiliency built into their comp plans going forward. So we're doing it. So thank you.
No more questions from former DNREC secretaries, please.
With that, I'm going to have to close our panel, but I see some hands, and I know that our great state senator and secretary might stick around for a second, try to answer anybody's questions, but I do want to get on to our next panel. So first, if we give a round of applause to Senator Hansen and Secretary Patterson.